Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 40k Badcast, episode 28. We're back after a little bit of hiatus. Campbell, why don't you explain to us why we're late with this episode?
Remember like a year ago when I was late for a few episodes because I was trying to buy a house? Well, guess what? Totally different game. It's a year later and I was late for an episode because I was trying to buy a house. But this time I actually got one.
Yay!
So, yay. I have responsibilities that I'm not quite ready for. So I'm here in my new house. I am broadcasting to you live from the box fort to talk about Warhammer 40,000.
Is that what you're calling your office/gaming area?
So there is a basement, and the plan is to finish that out someday. Like, that's kind of a bit out there because we're working on the art stuff first. But once it is finished, I shall christen it the Ham Slam Bunker.
Ooh.
You gotta have a name. You gotta have a name.
You gotta have a name. Hopefully, maybe one day I'll get up there when you're done with it, and we can slam some hams in your Ham Slam Bunker.
Yeah, and you can actually, sleep on a bed because I have room for that now.
Ooh, fun.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's it, guys. We're a few weeks late with this, and we are sorry. We try to stay on schedule and do this so we can get you guys that sweet hammy content that you so desire. But sometimes life gets in the way. So I'm, in the spirit of forgiveness in Christianity, I'm forgiving Campbell for his transgressions against my time, and I hope that you'll do the same. Let's get into the aspects, man. I don't have too much, actually. Since we came back from Adepticon, well, not we, but I came back from Adepticon.
I had
a little bit of painting hangover, and took some days off from painting. Finished up the Power Fist captain for the Raven Guard, but I've got my first 5 Orlocks done for my Hulkamania themed Orlock gang for Necromunda.
That you do, and they are looking really good and not too McDonald's-y anymore.
No, man, I was texting with you, I guess last week something, and I hated them.
Yeah,
I thought they looked awful, and this was in the base coating stage, like not even the secondary base coats for like the red and the yellow, but just the standard Averland Sunset and Corn Red base coats that I was doing, and they look so bad.
The first step of any new paint scheme is utterly fucking loathing it.
Yeah, it was really bad. But when I got to the point where I had put my washes on there or my shades or whatever, it started to really come together and start to look pretty good. So I named them too.
Oh,
my leader is Terry, because that's Hulk Hogan's real name is Terry.
I gathered that Hulk was not the name his mother gave him. That was not his Christian name, his birth name. But Terry, is his last name even Hogan?
No, it's Bolea.
Terry Bolea. It's terrible. It's actually terrible.
Yeah, so Terry, Randy, Animal, Devon, and Coco are my first 5 wrestlers, gangers, whatever, for those for the Hulkamaniacs. And I'm very excited. I think they came out really, really good, which was kind of a surprise because I didn't like them going into it, but I'm excited to get the next 5 done.
Dope. No, I'm loving how they're looking so far. And
for the Necro Slam Spa weekend.
Yeah, that's coming up in just 2 weeks.
2 weeks. I am full of excitement.
Yeah, I'm full of a lot of things, but at the moment, also excitement.
Have you been able to work on anything with your move?
Yeah, actually. So just before I was moving, I was outside spray painting. And for context, there's this one dude who lived outside my old apartment, who lived in my old apartment building because he was always outside my old apartment building. I don't think he lived outside there, but he was like always
he
wearing
wasn't living on the street.
So this dude was always wearing sunglasses regardless of the time of day.
Nice.
Always smoking at least one cigarette.
Nice.
And just had like big bushy beard and a bunch of piercings all over the place. And I was kind of like, oh, smoking guy's out there again, whatever. And I'm out there spraying one day, and all of a sudden I just hear, "Oi, is that a Land Raider?" And it turns out, number one, smoking guy is Australian. I think his name is Alex. And number 2, he plays Iron Hands, and he was actually really nice.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
So you had lived in the same... How long did you live in that building?
Only about a year.
Okay, but you lived in that building for a year, and you didn't know that he was a fellow ham.
I did not know that he was an Aussie ham hanging out right there, and I apologize for my fucking terrible Australian accent. But he told me about this thing called Artist Asylum, which is actually near my old apartment in Somerville, where they have a Warhammer paint night. And it's just this like community artist space where you can just come hang out, and they have classes. They had a ton of stuff going on before PAX because of all the cosplay stuff. So a lot of people you see in like, you know, armor or whatever, building their actual stuff there because they can't fit that in their apartments because rent's insane in Somerville.
Yeah.
But it was super cool to actually meet that guy and hear about that place. And actually,
then
when I was
immediately say goodbye to him,
and immediately say goodbye to him, I did give him a Badcast biz card before I left. So if he's listening, cool, you'll find out how to contact us by the end of the episode. I'd love to hang out with you. But also, speaking of costumes and Peel building stuff, I was at PAX, and I was at PAX East, big game convention out here in Boston, and bunch of games to play, all kinds of cool stuff. But there were a couple people in Warhammer cosplay, which is super cool. Including this one person named Jewel, and she was in this crazy tech priest costume where she was like 7 feet tall because she was up on stilts, and she was super nice. And we actually got to chat for a little bit and show off some of each other's models and so on. And I gave her a business card too. And I also got to garble blood for the blood god at a guy dressed as a Khorne berserker crossing the street.
Ooh.
Although he wasn't wearing like any sort of lifts or risers in his boots like a lot of people doing power armor do. So he just looked really, really wide. Because Space Marine power armor, it turns out the proportions of the models is like before the Primaris, like the regular squat Marines, is kind of as close as most people can get without having some sort of stilt situation.
Yeah. But, you know, I was doing a little comparison after I finished my Orlocks between the Orlock models and the Primaris Space Marine models. Mm-hmm. And the Orlock guys only come up to their chests.
That's how it's supposed to be.
It's actually really cool. I'll try to go home and post some pictures on my Twitter about that.
Yeah.
It's a really cool comparison.
Well, speaking of gangers, I got to actually finish painting my first 5 Goliaths.
The Team Meat version 2.
Yeah, the Butcher's Block. BLOC, get it? But yeah, so there's Ham Slamberger, the big boy with the hammer, and I forget the rest of their names, but I don't have them down yet because I'm still trying to figure out who everybody is. But I painted the first 5 of them with this very brown, heavy, rusty scheme. And I feel like it might lack a little bit of contrast, but once they were on the shinier metallic base, they looked a bit better. But I'm getting to experiment with skin tones a lot, which is fun, and also experiment with weathering on armor panels and not just big old vehicles.
Yeah, I'm thinking I'm going to do some weathering on these guys after I finish painting them. And you know, I'll come back to them a little bit. Because I've never really done weathering before, and I want to get some practice in. And I think they or my Blood Bowl orcs would be perfect for it.
Yeah, I think they'd both be good contenders. This Necromunda is made for all the rust and grime and dirt and so on. And honestly, it's not hard to add that stuff. I'm glad I did the dry brushed rusty metal before I started doing the skin just for neatness sake, but it was not hard to do.
Okay, cool. Have you gotten any games in
actually,
while you're moving?
I got a few. I actually got one in before the last episode, and I just didn't get to talk about it.
Ooh.
So there's this dude, a local guy I've been talking to for a while named Matt Lovett. And first of all, he called me out for pronouncing Iron Sheik wrong because it turns out it is Iron Shake, and Sheik is a character in Super Smash Brothers.
Fuck you, Campbell.
Yep. What's that? I mispronounced something and swore it was true?
Fuck you. I knew I was right.
Some people say both pronunciations are correct, but you know what? I'm just gonna. He called me out on it. I'll assume he's right. I'll assume you're right because you're probably both correct.
ZZ Top will never steer you wrong. Shake your booty. That's where I got it from. I fucking knew it.
Frank Beard wouldn't lie to me.
Love it. You're my dude forever. You are a fuckboy. I don't care if you're a bad boy. You're a fuckboy now. I'm claiming you.
Honorary fuckboy. So anyway, I actually finally got to get a game in with him. We've been talking a long time. And he's a lovely dude, but he brought custodies, custard, whatever, and it was not an especially fun game as a result of that, because just nothing really died. So, for instance, there's this one moment where I had a 15-man Crusader squad, a 10-man Vanguard squad, both those squads loaded with power weapons and power fists, lightning claws, and so on, supported by Helbrecht, so they're rerolling everything and their +1 strength. And I used a stratagem that let them fight twice. And they killed 4 guys and only barely.
Yeah.
And it took the Thunderhammer to actually kill 2 of them. And it was just a lot of that sort of like, I'm just scratching, I'm hitting your guys with pool noodles, and then my guys just melt.
Were they regular custodes or were they shield captains?
Regular custodes. He's not like a cheesy dude. He just happens to have custodes. He has them for Horus Heresy, and he's thrilled that he can use them in 40k now too. Huh. But yeah, it wasn't really super great as a result of just the matchup, but he was still a super cool dude. We didn't get to finish the game because the game store was closing, because we had to meet over there and traffic kept me from getting there in time. Yeah. But hopefully we'll get another game before too long. Probably once half my shit is unpacked and I can actually leave my house comfortably. I also played 3 games of Necromunda with Dylan, just trying to get up to speed with the rules in preparation for the Ham Slam Spot weekend. Yeah. It was about 700 credits at 5 gangers per side. I just used my 5 painted dudes. He used 5 of his painted Van Sars. And all 3 games were fun, but all 3 games were total wipeouts. Just my guys steamrolling his dudes.
Really?
Combat shotguns, man.
Ooh.
You haven't gotten to play with them yet, but I don't think. But you get to use a flame template. And when you're playing on the boards, especially that come with the game, everything's packed really tight. And every dude takes D6 strength 2 hits.
Maybe I should dump one of my juves and give my shotgun gangers combat shotguns. But then I think my starting roster only has like 7 or dudes in it, which maybe I'll just go with regular shotguns. See how it works.
A combat shotgun's like 60 points.
Yeah, it's a lot. They're good, though.
They're really good because it's super cool because when you're playing these tight confines, and we had doors and barricades and stuff like that set up, and it was just kind of just 2 people circling each other, waiting for the right moment to make the right move. And it's like any wrong move will probably cost me the game. And I happen to get the right timing on all 3 games. And yeah, combat shotguns, just to reiterate, they're D6 automatic hits, a strength 2. Which doesn't seem like a lot, but everything is toughness 3. So when you're rolling, 3 or 4 dice looking for 5s, you're probably going to get at least 1, and you don't need to roll to hit because it's a template weapon. So my guys have kind of shitty ballistic skill, and it doesn't matter that much. They can just clear a room in no time.
I was looking through the rules, the Necromunda rules, for the differences between the gangs, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of the Goliath guys are like stronger and tougher, and the Escher ladies are, quicker and faster or whatever. And I was looking at the Orlok stuff and I was like, these guys aren't particularly tough or fast or whatever. And then I looked at their like cool and leadership and willpower stats, and they're way better than Goliaths and Eschers. Like the line for the 4, it's like leadership, cool, intelligence, and willpower for the leader is like 4 up, 5 up, 5 up, 5 up, and all on 2 dice.
Yeah, so that's pretty solid.
He's like doing all of his leadership rules and everything like without any problem whatsoever. And I was looking at the other guys, and it looks like like cool checks and willpower checks and stuff are not going to be too much of a problem for an Orlok gang.
That's super cool. Like I figure they're supposed to be kind of the well-rounded, dependable, reliable gang because the Goliaths and the Eschers are 2 bigger extremes, which is why they put them in the starter set, just to kind of differentiate things more than in the old starter set where it was Goliaths and your boys.
Yeah.
You get any games in?
Yeah, I got one since Adepticon against our friend Evan Felim on the SA forums, and we did a 1850 game with my Raven Guard against his just regular Imperial Guard Ascadians, and I got my ass kicked.
Womp womp. What happened?
He had Pask, he had a Brigade of Guard with like some Scions, Pask, 3 Russes, another tank commander, and it was just one of those things where he picked me apart at range, and there was my first turn came around, my repulsor just totally whiffed, and then I got shot to pieces after that, and it was the sort of thing like where all of his tanks were all the way back, and I didn't really have a chance to get my Hellblasters in range to shoot at him and stuff, and it was just kind of a game where I just didn't. I whiffed with one thing on the first turn, and I was like, okay, well, I was thinking, might want to pack up because there really wasn't any coming back after that. But he's a cool dude and nice guy, so it was nice to hang out with him.
Cool. Is he local to you, or he's happened to be in town?
We went to he's Maryland. We went to Annapolis to play at Third Eye Games so it's it's an okay space.
Okay.
Like their game, they have a comic shop and a gaming store. It's an okay space. Like when I walked in there, the first thing that happened was one of their employees was like, "Hey, where'd you park?" And I'm like,
Ooh.
at first I'm like, in my head, I want to answer with "fuck you," like because
where'd you park? Up your ass.
Yeah. No, I was like out front, and he's like, "Oh, why don't you park out back? That's where everybody parks as they're playing games." I'm like, oh, okay, well, this could have been done in a more tactful manner, but I'm not gonna talk shit. I'm gonna talk shit on my podcast, but I'm not gonna talk shit to you first. So that, and then like their gaming area is it was like big and open and honestly a little cold. No carpets on the floors, and their tables were like chest high on me.
Why would you have bar height tables?
Yeah, so like that's kind of like cool for if you have all of your stuff in the back, like Evan did, and it was just lobbing shit. But like when I'm like trying to move up, trying to reach over, and trying to do any measuring from above, you know how sometimes you measure from above because you can't fit your tape measure like in there to get like you couldn't do that because the tables were too high.
Oh Lord! I mean, think on the bright side, you don't have to measure out templates at least.
Yeah, right. 30k players still do that. Perfect rule set over there in 30k. Best game ever. No updates needed. Anyways, I thought 30 games was okay.
Okay.
And it's also in like an industrial kind of shitty part of Annapolis. And there's like the closest place for lunch was a Subway, and Subway is terrible.
It's like,
I was
Subway.
Not super impressed by it. I think I like Games and Stuff in Glen Burnie a lot more. But, whatever. It's 10 minutes closer than Games and Stuff. But no, it was a good time. When we were like talking about what kind of game we're going to play, I was like, this is just Primaris. It's 1850. It's not like a super hard list. And he's like, all right, so I won't bring any Custodes. And I was like, oh, great. I don't need to deal with these fuckers again. So he didn't bring Custodes. So he's kind of nice to me in that respect, which I appreciate.
That's good.
So as we move on to new stuff for 40k, there's been a bunch of fantasy new stuff. We talked about the Ideneth Deepkin last time, and I had a mispronunciation episode where I called them the Ideneth Deepkin because I can't read, and so sorry about that, listeners. I guess
you mispronounced a fake word. I think it's okay.
There's been a bunch of that, and all that stuff looks really cool, but that's Age of Sigmar, so we're not going to talk about it. But we are going to talk about the FAQ, the big FAQ, the FAQ, the frequently asked questions and errata that came out, the day before yesterday. We're recording this on the 19th of April, so I think it came out on the 17th. And Campbell, talk about a game changer.
Yeah, it seems to kind of cut the heart out of a lot of the spammier things out there and a lot of the more problematic lists that were being tossed out at all the big events like AdeptCon and so on.
My initial impression is that it's good. This is a good thing for the game. Let's talk about the big changes. So it cemented the beta rules that had been in effect. The +1 to cast smites was one of them. And what was the other one? There was one more.
Was it the character targeting one?
Yes, the character targeting. Yeah. But it gave exceptions to Grey Knights and Thousand Sons for the +1 smites.
Yeah, which is good because that was going to kind of unfairly hurt these two armies that frankly need the help.
Right, yeah. So now you can happily smite away with your Thousand Sons and Grey Knights without any cumulative penalties. And now the whole character thing is like characters can't screen characters for shooting.
Yeah, because you ended up with silly situations where, say, Custodes captain or shield captains on the bikes, could keep shuffling around and dodge the wounds and put the wounded guy in the back.
Or you'd have a more commonly, you'd have a Calexis assassin stand out in front of your characters, and that thing you can only hit it on like 6s. So it would just stand there and tank everything, and that all your characters in the back hiding behind them, being like, "What's up, boy?" So that they cemented those. Those are in the rule book. Got to do those. And they introduced 2 new beta rules. One of them was that deep striking, and I'm saying that in quotes. I think everybody knows what that means. When you're not deployed and you come on later in the game. On turn 1, you can only deep strike into your own deployment zone.
I'm kind of two minds in that one because it does cut down on Alpha Strike, which is great. because less Alpha Strikers, the better. You don't have the Scions dropping with plasma guns or what have you. But you also have some situations like, say, dropping down assault units that you would want to actually get into assault before they get shot to pieces. Like whether that's Assault Marines or Thunderhammer Storm Shield Terminators or Storm Boys or whatever else can deep strike and do that sort of thing. I think Storm Boys can deep strike. They used to be able to. So I think it does cut. I think the effect against Alpha Strike shooting units is greater than the effect against Alpha Strike assault units. But I wish there was a little bit more of a compromise for first turn assault units.
You can still bring down your assault units on turn 2 and 3 and assault with them on that same turn.
Yeah, you can.
You know, it just might require you to make a more balanced army.
Yeah, it's also going to change.
There's a lot of the problems was like you would just deep strike Magnus, right? Mm-hmm. Just so he wouldn't get shot on the first turn, or same with Mortarion.
Yeah,
you know, like you deep strike them into your deployment zone anyways. You know, and so now there's deep strikers, instead of number of units to be held in reserve, has to be half of your power level.
Which I think
so if you're going to hold Magnus or Mortarion in reserve, you're talking like 30-some power level right there. And if you're playing, you know, a 2,000 point game or something, and you've got, you know, only a certain maybe 100 to 110 power level out of your army, then that's a big chunk of change in there. You're not going to be able to deep strike that much more.
Yeah, I do think it's a little clunky to introduce power level and points values in the same match. That seems a little weird working with both.
Yeah, but I'm sure like when they bring out their Battle Scribe Killer, whatever we're calling it, it'll have both in there. I mean, because power level will be free, and the points you pay $1 a month or however much it is, and it'll be pretty easy to just have that right in front of you.
Yeah.
So another one was Battle Brothers, they're calling it. And what this is saying is it's getting rid of soup within detachments. And what I mean by that is you can no longer have a brigade of guard led by a custodian. Mm-hmm. You have to, if you're going to have Astra Militarum, they all need to be in their own detachment. And your Adeptus Custodes need to be in their detachment. You can't have them in the same detachment. You can have them in the same army, but not in the same detachment anymore.
And there's some armies like Sisters of Silence. Well, armies is a strong word, but some factions like Sisters of Silence or Assassins where you can't they don't have HQ options, and they have some little errata in there, so you can still take them without the HQ option in their own detachment of just elites.
You can take they work around it by saying you can take a Vanguard detachment without any HQ that doesn't give you any extra command points, and it doesn't break your army. It doesn't make your army not battle forged. Which is good, because those units are supposed to be taken in like a support capacity. And taking them just in a auxiliary detachment, which is -1 CP, I mean, it's good that there's a workaround for not having to penalize players.
Yeah, that is actively hurtful.
And so there are two things that they added to the organized play rules, which aren't necessarily beta rules. I think these are just new rules that we're working with. And the first one is command points. Brigades and battalions got upgraded command point totals. So now a brigade, instead of giving you +9 command points, you'll get +12. And instead of +3 command points from a battalion, you'll get +5. So if you have one brigade in your battle-forged army, you'll get 15 command points to spend. Which is pretty fucking cool, because Chaboy loves playing with a brigade of Astra Militarum, my Steel Legion.
When you already weren't ever... Well, you were running out of command points, but you were recycling. Yeah, which is insane.
But there were times when I would jump up to, I'd end up using 20 command points in a game or something.
I also do like that this means that armies like Space Marines or Custodes or whatever, like more elite armies that have trouble filling out all the big charts can actually get enough command points to use some of their stratagems, because there's a ton of stratagems in there that are like 2 or 3 command points, and I'm never going to use those when I had like 5 to play with.
Yeah, exactly. It was tough when Adepticon, when I was using my Raven Guard, and I would only have like 6 command points a game. I want to use Honor the Chapter or whatever to fight again, but that's 3 command points, man. That's half my command points right there.
Yeah, and I was like, I've played in tournaments where I just had a chapter master the entire time, because I figured, what's better, 3 individual rerolls or this guy giving rerolls to all hits around him? Like, they won't be as clutch, but they're always in effect, and that left me with nothing to play with.
Yeah, I feel you. So the other change is a reduction on how many what do you call them? The not battle tomes, but the we know what I'm talking about. The fucking data sheets.
Oh, okay.
Whatever.
The rule of 3.
Yeah. So it's not necessarily the rule of 3. It's the rule of 2, 3, and 4, where you can only use the same unit or the same unit derived from the same data sheet to up to 1,000 points. You can only have 2. Up to 2,000 points, 1,001 to 2,000 points, you can only have 3, and 2,000 and up, 2,000, 3,000 points, you can have 4 per army. And I don't know, at 3,000 points, you should just play fucking epic.
You're not wrong.
But so generally, 2,000 points is what we usually play, right? So you're looking at 2 of the same or 3 of the same units per army, 0 to 3. So no more 7 Hive Tyrant lists. I can't rock my 10 Russes in a list, probably, unless there's weird squad rules I can end up doing. It cuts down big time on spamming. No, there's no more like 5 units of Dark Reapers.
Yeah.
Who
got a price increase, thankfully.
Yeah. So, we'll get to price increase and stuff in a second. And also suggests battlefield size. So 1,000-point games should be played on a 4x4 instead of a 6x4, which is better, much better.
I agree with. So the other thing is also that cuts down, there goes the assassin spam list, or at least that silly assassin circus. That sucks to say. Whoa. It cuts down that sort of shit. It cuts down the shield captain spam. The only thing it doesn't cut down is troops and dedicated transports.
That's right. Forgot to mention that.
You can still field your guard brigade of infantry. You can still field your Space Marine company. Oh, shame. You can only field 3 guard heavy weapon squads. Shucks.
Oh, no. That's a good thing. Because people were coming out with like 9 squads of like mortar teams or whatever.
Oh, my God. I just had a flashback to Adepticon last year when I played against the 9 quad mortar list, and I'm shaking. But
fight through it.
I'll fight through the pain.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's cool. I think this is really the first time GW has done something specifically to curb spam beyond the general force organization chart.
Yeah.
And I like it because I know there's been talk before in events of things like Highlander lists where you can only take 1 of each unit, or some self-imposed comp in certain events. But this is, this is the tablet coming down from the mountain telling us we can only have up to 3 of a unit in a 2,000-point game. I like it. It does limit some people's army lists, but a lot of those were abusive army lists, and I'd rather have this in effect for the greater good, not the capital G greater good, the tau, like just the greater good of the game.
Yeah, I think it will make the game. I think it'll make the game a lot more interesting. If you're not going up against 6 Hive Tyrants or 7 Hive Tyrants or how many when you go to your local tournament or whatever. And lastly, in the fact they updated some points, which I'm not going to get into the granularity of what they updated. And then they went to every codex and did an update on those too, with new FAQ and new errata for every single codex. So if you didn't know that yet, go over to Warhammer Community and check it out, because your book probably got an update. I know that my books, Space Marines and Imperial Guard, did get updates, and a couple of things in there changed. So make sure you go and you check that out so you're not playing with outdated rules.
Yeah, I will say, on the one hand, I'm super happy GW is updating the game and engaging with the community to get ideas on how to update the game. But now there's a lot more bookkeeping, all this, or not bookkeeping, but I have more things to keep track of. So I'm looking forward to when Chapter Approved comes out at the end of the year, because I didn't get the first one, and I don't think I'm gonna, because there's not that much for me in there. But I feel like this is kind of like 40k 8.5 edition almost, in a way. Like, it's a healthy upgrade of the whole game.
Yeah, I like it too, and we talked about this before. We both agree that they should just release all the rules digitally and update them as they need updates. But I think the whole publication part of it, they're still a pretty old school company in a lot of ways, and the whole book making thing that they love to do so much is still, that's going to be what we're going to deal with, unfortunately.
And yeah, there's good sides and bad sides, but yeah.
Okay, so we got a couple of cool conversations this show, but I want to first talk about something. I was challenged recently on Twitter by a listener about my choice of inspiration for my Necromunda gang. And this is, I think, especially pertinent because one of our recent episodes, we talked about how problematic the entire Outlanders book for Necromunda supplement is. And then I went and started talking about how I was going to make a Hulkamania themed Necromunda gang, while Hulk Hogan himself is kind of a piece of shit.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to address this. So, first off, the Outlanders book is problematic, yeah. But both of us still have a lot of love for that book, for what it did for Necromunda campaigns back in the day. And Terry Bollea, the guy who plays the character of Hulk Hogan, he sucks. He's a racist, and he was a pawn in billionaire vampire Peter Thiel's quest to completely get rid of Gawker Media, which was their products that I enjoyed their products a lot. So in 2007, Terry Bollea was caught on tape berating his daughter about dating a black guy, and he said the N-word a ton. Cool. Yeah, right. Really, really cool. And then the whole 2016, I guess it's happened in 2012, but it finished up in 2016. His friend secretly videotaped Terry having sex with his friend's wife, and then Gawker the website Gawker got a hold of it and posted it online. And then because he has a vendetta, Peter Thiel, and the vendetta was that Gawker outed Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel's gay, and Gawker released that information years ago, and Thiel has hated them for it for years. And so when the Hulk Hogan thing came about, he backed Hulk Hogan's legal team, basically, and engineered a $31 million settlement to Hulk Hogan from Gawker Media, which ended up bankrupting the company, and they had to shut their doors and sell most of their products off. So that whole stuff sucks. Mm-hmm. I think the racism sucks more than them bankrupting a website I liked, but that sucks. And it sucks because Terry Bollea, as he has proven, is a shitty person. Mm-hmm. The reason I enjoy Hulkamania is because, and just 90s, classic wrestling so much. It's because I was a kid, I was so into it, man. I was buying magazines for it. I was going to whatever indie shows and whatever shows were coming through the area all the time. I lived and breathed professional wrestling when I was a kid, especially in the 90s. And guys like Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage and Bam Bam Bigelow and Koko Beware, and even like The Undertaker and stuff were heroes to me. And so when I look back on the 90s era wrestling with the bright colors and the huge personalities and the tons of fun they were having in the ring and those incredible marquee matches that they were in, I look back on it with great love and nostalgia. Not for the people that performed that, but for the characters they were playing. So I get it that having a positive view of Hulk Hogan could be a problematic viewpoint for somebody who cares about that sort of thing. And I am somebody who cares about that sort of thing. But in this case, it's not about the person. It's about the memories and the stories and the heroics on stage, and not that much about the performers. A lot of the times, the things that I like, because I'm a big baseball fan, baseball players, a lot of them suck. One of my favorite baseball players, again, not for who he is, but because he's on the Nationals and is good, Daniel Murphy. Daniel Murphy is a hardcore fundamentalist Christian who, quote unquote, doesn't agree with the gay lifestyle. And he said that in an interview. And I think that's disgusting. Mm-hmm. But he hits a lot of home runs. So I'm not perfect. I understand this. The things I like, a lot of them aren't perfect. You look at this game, we're going to be talking about it in this next segment. It's not perfect. And I understand that. And I just wanted to address it. I get it. Hulk Hogan sucks. But I'm not over here a fan of Terry Eugene Bollea. I'm a fan of the Hulkamaniacs, and what you going to do, brother, when Hulkamania runs wild on you. So thanks for listening to me talk about that, guys. We're going to get to the next segment now. And Campbell, what are we talking about with this next segment? What's the question we're asking?
Are we the baddies?
Are we, though?
Why are we, a couple of fairly well-educated, relatively coherent, and generally progressive dudes, so into the Imperium, which is essentially a fascist nightmare state.
A fascist theocracy.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Don't forget that part.
A theocratic fascist space dystopia.
Yeah, what is it that engenders so much appeal to us about the Imperium? And it's a good question, man, because I'm all in on the Imperium, dude, when it comes to Warhammer 40,000.
Yeah.
I fucking love it. I've got all the armies I have, my Grey Knights, my Raven Guard, my Steel Legion, all Imperium factions. I could see myself playing Orcs, honestly, but that's so far down the road and so far, like, you know, back into projects that, you know, it might never happen.
Yeah.
But for the rest of it, man, you know, our friends who we go out to eat or go out to drink at conventions or whatever, and we're yakking about stuff. And if somebody starts talking shit about the Imperium, you know, I'm siding up and be like, I heard you talking shit, motherfucker. What's up?
Yeah, I mean, I read the Regimental Standard.
I used to bring my Imperial Guardsman's Uplifting Primer to games and read quotes out of it during games.
That's always in my case with my Imperial Guard army.
Yeah, so what about this faction, this setting, is so attractive to us who would, you know, in the real world find this sort of behavior and stuff repulsive? So let's talk about, Campbell, where did this setting come from?
All right. So Warhammer 40,000 is very much a product of the 80s, and not just a product of the 80s, but a product of 80s Britain. And the political climate was, for lack of a better term, hot. It was tense. It was a tense climate back then. Yeah. This is the climate that gave birth to Judge Dredd, to V for Vendetta, to the entire punk movement, to just tons of just independent, angry satire and art. And this was largely in, again, we're Americans, going by what research we've done here, we did not live through it, but this is the product of angry working class folks. Because in 80s Britain, you had Margaret Thatcher come in and smash unions and smash welfare and smash immigration and LGBT people. And she was very pro-Victorian values and nationalism and these sorts of very conservative concepts that we have trouble struggling with today and in our entire world. And when you're the person on the receiving end of this, when you're the person who's in a town that lost all its jobs to coal miners because all its mining jobs because she let the union collapse, or, you know, you're someone on the fringe of society basically being told you don't exist and you should get on your bike and go get a job, because when instead of being angry about not having a job, you get some very angry people trying to express themselves. And that's what led to punk music coming out. Largely as this accessible, angry, but vocal platform. And that also inspired a number of artists, whether that was the comic book artists who did Judge Dredd, as I mentioned before, or Alan Moore doing V for Vendetta. And as a result of that influenced the writers of Warhammer 40,000, who were soaking in these comic books. They were soaking in this music. As far as I understand it, like, Nottingham is not a, you know, particularly metropolitan or cosmopolitan part of Britain. It's on the up and up. According to in the 80s, but in the 80s it was not. Right. It's historically been a working class town that has like a lot of factory jobs, a lot of manufacturing coming out of there, right? Yeah, and it does have the, you know, it still has the boogeyman of being called Shottingham because someone got shot there like a while ago. And we've made this joke before, but we're in America. This happens all the time here. So I think a lot of the people that became the architects of Warhammer 40,000 grew up in a somewhat oppressive regime, and were faced by a very active and somewhat violent police force, an uncaring and aristocratic government. You know, we have to remember that, you know, there are aristocrats and nobles in England too, and not everybody likes that. Yeah, they're mostly figureheads, but yeah. One of the things that a lot of people do when they're met by this stuff is they embrace it with satire. And the idea of the world being controlled by an extreme, an authoritarian and religious extreme, and what would that look like and how would life be under that, is something that these guys explored. Yeah, from seeing what that government did to its people, where it can make you feel kind of dehumanized or like less of a person, or like you don't matter, you're at best a cog, you can really clearly see how that can be reflected into this, nightmarish, xenophobic, xenocidal future where, virtues like purity are absolutely paramount. And that plays into the whole historical inspiration from the medieval church being pulled into the 40k setting as well. Because, to quote, Victorian values were one of the things being pushed by Thatcherism, which are incredibly Puritan.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Big time. I've been recently watching this show on AMC called The Terror. Mm-hmm. If you haven't watched it, it's pretty cool. It's about British Navy in the 1800s and like the way that they speak to one another. Like you can see like the idea of Victorian values on display there, and it's very stilted and what's the word I'm looking for? Fancy, not fancy, but
proper.
Yeah, very stilted and proper kind of language when they're talking to one another, which is not really a thing anymore today. So my question is, what do you think is the appeal of this? We've talked about the history and where it came out of a little bit. So what's the appeal of the Imperium? And I wrote down 3 things that I could bring into, but I want to hear what you have to say first.
Well, let's start with the relatability factor, because we look for ourselves in whatever we consume. Now, whether that is our own abilities, our physical appearance, or just our values. The Imperium, at its most basic, represents humanity. It is still a society that, although it is a nightmare society, is one that we can at least recognize and more or less fathom.
It's the home team.
It is the home team.
That's why I wanted to be an Imperium player.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I'm human. I'm humanity, mankind.
It's the same reason when I play D&D or Baldur's Gate or whatever role-playing game, I usually go for a normal human person. Normal is kind of whatever, but a human, because it reflects against the setting better.
Well,
because
D&D, remember, at least in 3rd edition in 3.5, which is kind of the last time I played, was humans got extra feats at like every other level, which made them very versatile characters.
Well, if you have extra feats in the Imperium, you're a mutant and you'll be executed. But
That's
under
good.
all that armor,
really
a space marine, like when he takes his helmet off, he still looks like a person. A guardsman is a regular person like you or me, and they fight alongside other people who look like you or me. And the Imperium is, despite its nightmarish nature, it is civilization, it is society, and we are conditioned to do what is good for our societies. Ergo, the Imperium is easy to root for.
Right. So I'd say that tribalism is a big part of why a lot of people like the Imperium.
Hugely.
Where it's the same reason why I love the Washington Nationals, because it's the sports team that's from where I grew up.
It's the same reason I am intravenously hooked up to a gallon of Dunkin' Donuts coffee right now. It tastes terrible, but I can't stop having my dunks.
There's a bunch of New Englanders in my office who won't shut the fuck up about Dunkin' Donuts and how much better it is than everything else. And I don't drink coffee, so I don't really, have a horse in that fight. Horse in that fight? Okay, now we'll go with it. A horse in that fight, because we're at a horse fight.
I'm pretty sure those are illegal. I'm pretty sure Michael Vick went to jail for those.
Oh, God. Okay.
But yeah, no, if you want real tribalism, go to Pennsylvania and bring up Wawa.
Okay. You know what? I produce podcasts for my job, and sometimes our hosts get into this fucking Wawa argument, and I do not get it. It's a fucking convenience store. It's a gas station
with hoagies.
I don't want to talk about it. Let's get back to what we're fucking talking about.
Let's get back to this. Yeah.
Can I bring up a point of something I think a lot of people like about the Imperium?
Sure.
I think they like the absolutism.
Oh yeah, it's very obviously us versus them, and it's very easy to understand. That's very black and white.
Right. You talking about purity and ideological purity. Mm-hmm. And in Warhammer 40,000 universe, like, if you don't fully take in all the things that the ecclesiarchy has to say, I mean, there's a shot that you'll fall to chaos.
Yeah.
If you're not pure of body and mind, then you could become a mutant or some sort of possession puppet for a demon or something and end up destroying an entire world and killing billions of people. Like that is a risk in the the universe of Warhammer 40,000 setting that exists. That does not exist in the real world.
Yeah,
and I'll tell you, this is something that I enjoy about it actually, and you know, maybe this says something about me, but when it comes to like my leisure activities, you know, I don't want to think too hard.
Yeah,
you know, and when the choice is between like us and them, or you know, the power of mankind against the degradations of chaos or whatever, like I think for me it's pretty simple what I'm going to choose, and I like that it's black and white in the 40k universe. There's no room for argument or thoughts or anything like that. And I'm smiling as I say this because it's stupid.
Yeah,
and it doesn't reflect the real world at all, and it doesn't reflect how I feel about the real world at all. But when it comes to this, you know, silly game that we like to play, I think it's absurd that, you know, the Imperium could exist and would exist. And I enjoy that absurdity. And part of the absurdity to me is that it is always so black and white.
Yeah. And mind you, black and white does not mean good versus evil here. Like that's all relative.
It's mainly us versus them when it comes to black and white. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, and there are more complex factions. Like Tau is I think a more complex faction because they talk about, there's a lot of like weird stuff going on. There's, you know, pheromone based mind control from the ethereal caste. They take in human settlers or human the auxiliaries and sterilize them. You know, and they, but at the same time, you know, Tau citizens are probably, you know, like JD and I were talking about a Devagon, probably living better than Imperial citizens are.
Yeah. But
in most cases,
then again, the alternatives to the Imperium are being eaten, murdered, enslaved, flayed, and sent to be trapped in space hell. So it's very easy to see the Imperium as comparatively inviting.
Right. So another thing that I found interesting, the Imperium has, you know, interestingly enough, a lot of similarities with the Galactic Empire.
Oh, yeah.
From Star Wars. Where the Galactic Empire is all very pro-human, very anti-alien, and, you know, a lot of messed up in a lot of ways. And the Empire is incredibly popular. And I think the main reason for the Empire's popularity is because they look so fucking cool.
Visual design has a lot to do with it.
Aesthetics.
Yeah. The big symbols of the Imperium are the eagle, the Aquila, and the skull. And often they appear together.
So everybody loves the way Darth Vader looks.
Yeah.
You know, everybody loves the way the Stormtroopers look. And I think that's a huge part of why the Empire... When I was a kid, when I was watching Star Wars, man, I loved Darth Vader. I thought he was the coolest guy. When I saw Rogue One, at the end of Rogue One, when Darth Vader is like, just like murking dudes in a hallway.
Yeah.
I was in my fucking seat in the movie theater, fucking freaking out in a good way.
Yeah.
In a good way. I was losing my fucking mind at Darth Vader, like in a dark hallway when the fucking lightsaber zips out and he's like throwing dudes around and chopping guys in half. I was like, fuck yes, this is exactly what I want to see. This is the coolest fucking thing I've ever seen. This is so great. And I think that look, the clean look of Space Marines, not Chaos Space Marines, but the clean lines and the clean look of Space Marines is very appealing to me.
Yeah.
And that's a major reason why I got into the Imperium is the way everything looks. Like I don't know what it is about everything, but I like Steel Legion because I think they're the coolest looking guardsmen. I like the boxy vehicles, but with the kind of rounded shape of the Space Marines. I like the way everything looks. I don't really like how like everything is round and smooth and Tau or like super flowy like in Eldar. I like the way Tyranids look. I think Tyranids look fantastic. I like the bug look. I'm not a huge... I mean, I like the ramshackle look of orcs and stuff within the context of orcs, but not necessarily within the context of the Imperium. And I just don't like the chaos aesthetic that much. Well, the spikes and the fucking lightning bolts and bat wings and shit.
There's a time and a place for them. But the thing is, that imagery is the entire Imperial aesthetic is strength. Everything is strength and stubbornness. Even their aircraft are designed to fight against the sky instead of being aerodynamic. They just put more engines on it so it looks bigger and stronger and pay no heed to how this thing would actually fly. But the strength of that imagery is the same reason why, you know, like a commercial for the U.S. Army, you might see that and go like, oh, that looks cool, because they show all this stuff looking big and powerful and noble and heroic, massive armies and giant war machines, and like the giant like churches you see in the background of all the Warhammer art are kind of intoxicating in how grandiose they are. And seeing the same things in the real world, whether that is, you know, a big military parade or giant propaganda art featuring, you know, big, strong imagery on it, or
fuck it, the National Mall in Washington, D.C.
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna.
You see these magnificent buildings.
Yeah,
these gleaming white, magnificent buildings. You know, in the summertime when the sun hits them, and they just light up.
Yeah, you get this sort of like stir in your chest, regardless of how you feel. And the same thing happens with, you know, the giant cathedrals in Europe that are so inspirational for so much of 40k's aesthetic. And
then you combine it with like a little bit of like religious reverence.
Mm-hmm.
And it can touch a lot of what people feel about, you know, when I see the Washington Monument or I see the National Cathedral or something where you know, I feel, you know, a little bit of pride in my Americanness, you know,
yeah.
a little bit like, hey, this is pretty good over here. This is not so bad, huh? It's a fucking big building. It looks pretty good. What you guys got over there, huh? A fucking clock? Fuck out of here.
Didn't know you're from Brooklyn, Dan.
No, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I know exactly.
And you see that, you see that stuff. Like when you see that shit on the battlefield, all the Space Marines all the same color. They got the same look. There's such a great unity in the way that's presented. It's intoxicating. It's wonderful.
Yeah, well, it's like there's, you know, the shot in the Star Wars movies where you see the rows and rows and rows of stormtroopers marching, or the same thing if you're watching anything like Roman legions, where you see the same sort of thing, where just guys marching in formation with perfectly spaced with the shield walls and all that stuff. It just kind of, it stirs something in you. It just looks like power.
So here's a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Why is this sort of like authoritarianism so prevalent in sci-fi?
It kind of, historically, it goes back a long way. I mean, you can very easily get people to buy into this us versus them narrative and internalize it when you dress it up with gee whiz super science or a power fantasy as potent as a Space Marine. So, for example, like speaking of Space Marines, kind of one of the foundational texts is Starship Troopers, the book, not the movie, which are
hey, but the movie was good. Not good, but good.
I adore that film, and the film and book are very different. So
that's Robert Heinlein.
Yes, Robert Heinlein, noted militaristic asshole and guy too right wing for the right wing, very strongly anti-communist to the point of dehumanizing them and calling them bugs and having them just be murdered in a war of human aggression throughout the Starship Troopers. But he's one of the foundational texts here, and so is Joseph Campbell, who, no relation, but the entire Campbellian hero's journey, which, again, to bring up Star Wars, is what Luke Skywalker's journey, as well as a million other pieces of fiction, come from. He was a dude who's really fucking racist, and some of that came through in some of his writing, such as in Constitution, where like only the rich can vote and stuff like that.
I mean, even in like fiction, Gene Roddenberry's Star Trek.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't have the, well, no, I mean, that's not true. Like the Federation was one thing, but most Star Trek took place on a ship where the captain is the ultimate authority.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And he might be serving higher ideals or whatever. But when Jean-Luc Picard says, hey, you know, Worf, blow that shit up, Worf he's like, all right, I don't agree with it, but I'll do it.
Never but never question the captain's orders.
Right. And so you and with the Federation, you get, you know, the very clean look. Everybody's in uniform, and it's, you know, all the ships are kind of looking the same, even though they look wonky as fuck to my sensibilities. But, you know, whatever. So there's a lot of this represented throughout history with a lot of the sci-fi settings that we're into.
Yeah. And granted, again, that is not all sci-fi authors by any stretch of the imagination, but a lot of them tend to be white dudes fighting a war for white dudes in space or whatever. A military science fiction, you get it more than other science fiction, but it happens a lot. The thing is also with this, 40k started as this satire, and I can't guarantee that over time, everyone who's been brought in to write about it really was on the same page. So,
certainly not.
Yes.
Certainly not. You look at the crazy variations in like how the Horus Heresy storyline has gone.
Yeah.
You know, like that thing, there's so many problems with that, but it's nuts like how far that has varied from different ends of the spectrum as far as like authoritarian leaning characters go.
On the one hand, you also have writers like fucking Jonathan Green, no relation to the Fault in Our Stars guy, who wrote his kind of distressingly racist feeling book at some points in Crusade for Armageddon. And then you have Dan Abnett writing about, the people on the ground in Gaunt's Ghosts or in Eisenhorn, where you get a more worldly view of what people can be like and what this world can be like.
Well, shit, one of our favorite books, Hell's Reach from Aaron Dembski Bowden, is like the Black Templars are violent zealots.
Yeah.
And we fucking love them for it. Because of it. Not in spite of it, because of it. They're like they're the fucking the lovable like sergeant in the war movie who is about to get captured and is out of ammo, and so he starts pulling out his like pistol and trying to take guys down. You know? Like he's like you're not taking me alive. They're that.
Yeah.
They're the tough guys. The fucking 40k tough guys.
And that's one of the kind of insidious things about this sort of narrative is that when you have these noble, heroic warriors willing to fight harder and die harder and live the longest and save the most people and like these very aspirational goals, and they're fighting for these nightmarish politics, it's kind of easier to swallow that. And it's easy in the frame of 40k for you to think that this nightmare regime is necessary for humanity to survive if people are this willing to die for it. Well,
it's almost farcical.
Yeah.
Like the setting is so awful, so incredibly awful in so many different ways that just even a little bit of shittiness doesn't even register.
Yeah.
This is a society that is okay with virus bombing and then burning completely planets full of billions of souls because of, whatever outbreak or battle or whatever the fuck is going on in there. They're just like, all right, well, we got to kill the planet now.
Yeah, or even suspicion.
Right. And that's what you're up against. So being like a corrupt governor of a system or a planet is fucking small potatoes compared to that.
Yeah. It's also effective because it can appeal to a lot of different sensibilities, like to be a guardsman or to be a space marine. Because you've got, on the one hand, you do have the guardsman where it's like, this is you and me. This is us versus them. This is the strength of our teamwork overcoming impossible odds, which is very, that's something positive to aspire to in a lot of ways. And then with the space marine, you have the ultimate
It's more like the weight of our corpses overcoming these impossible odds.
I'm giving the propaganda angle here. And then on the other hand, you do have the space marine, who is the ultimate power fantasy, where it's like, no one's shoving me in a locker. I'm shoving them in lockers and shoving those lockers inside smaller lockers because I'm so strong and so powerful and noble and gifted and heroic. You have this whole spectrum of where you can insert yourself among, and see yourself among the Imperium, which also helps a lot.
So let's get to some takeaways, man. It's cool to take a break from thinking about complex issues.
Yeah.
It's cool to take a break and just be like, aliens? Oh, we're going to kill them. Oh, mutants? Oh, we're going to kill all of them. Fuck them.
Exactly. It's just, and also
it's cool to give your brain a break.
Yeah. But
like when I went out with Carl and Justin, Christian, and saw the Pacific Rim movie, the second one, the new one.
Yeah.
I didn't need my brain for that.
Yeah. But being cognizant of what to take away into the rest of your life is very important here. And again, a lot of the old 40k fluff especially had some objectionable stuff in it too, separately, whether that was the gay jokes about the Dark Angels or the Outlander stuff we talked about in the previous episode. But it's also important to note that just because something you love or something you like or really identify with has problems does not mean necessarily that it's perfect or that you're perfect, and that's okay. Like you can realize these things have flaws and still love them.
Right. So, are we the baddies?
I mean, if you've seen how that sketch ends, they just run. So,
We'll let you decide.
We'll let you decide. Contact us at contact@40kbadcast.com and tell us that we're the baddies or not. Although we are called the 40k Badcast, so I think we might be giving something away on the answer there.
Hey-o. But hey, seriously, if you want to talk to us about this or you have a problem with this segment or something, drop us a line, contact@40kbadcast.com. We'd love to have conversations with you guys about this topic.
Yeah, it's
I'd love to get some more insight from people.
Let's say it's a very nuanced and very complex topic, and we can only do it so much justice in talking about it in the show for, it's like been like 45 minutes now, but for a bit.
Well, we were excited to talk about this just because we don't really hear people in our hobby talk about it.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons we actually pushed this episode back, was because I wanted the time to actually do my homework and, you know, really be able to form something relating to a cogent point here.
Okay, so let's move on to something stupid. You ready?
Yeah.
We're calling this next segment not Kramer versus Kramer, but Goth versus Goth in a Primarch showdown between Corvus Corax and Conrad Kurz.
Morrissey Goth versus Marilyn Manson Goth. Fight. Or don't.
The Cure versus, I don't know, Slipknot.
Yeah, that also works really well.
Okay, so we wanted to talk about these two fellas. Now, one thing, we're not going to talk about who wins the fight.
Yeah, no one cares if Superman can beat up Goku. No one cares if Master Chief can beat up Mario. This doesn't fucking matter. We want to talk about these two Primarchs, how they relate to each other a bit, and who they are.
Well, because they're very similar.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. Corvus Corax was scattered to the ends of the galaxy by Tzeentch after the Emperor created him in his lab, and landed on a place called Lycaeus, which is a moon of the planet, a forge world of Kievar. The people on Lycaeus were all slaves. They were criminals, recidivists, and political prisoners sent from Kievar to go work in the mines on Lycaeus. So Corax lands there, and as a child, like, they find him and they protect him and they bring him up in the slave worker culture. He is disgusted by the lives of the slaves and the treatment of the overseers. And so he ends up leading this big rebellion to free all the slaves and eventually take over Lycaeus. And then the Emperor shows up and they take over Kievar together. And so Corax is this sort of worker's hero, where he comes up and he frees the working class from Lycaeus, and they rename the moon to be Deliverance, and that's where the Raven Guard Fortress Monastery is ultimately placed on Deliverance. So he's kind of this hero who brings the working class, wrests the power from the rulers of the planet and distributes it amongst the people. Now, as we know, in the 41st millennium, that doesn't really happen anymore. It doesn't exist. It's a forge world. It's the Raven Guard are in control of the moon, and the forge world of Kievar is worked by the Adeptus Mechanicus. And the regular people don't have any say how any of this is run. It's run by Space Marines and tech priests. But at the beginning of it, it was a revolution. It was a people's revolution for freedom. And I think that is somewhat contrasted by Conrad Kurz's upbringing.
So, yeah, you have kind of like a space Che Guevara revolutionary, leader, and I have space murder Batman.
I would say more of a space Cesar Chavez, but
okay,
whatever you want to go with.
I'm sorry, I just thought of this T-shirt that has Che Guevara on it. It says Kurt Cobain. But yeah,
he's hyper-violent Batman.
Yeah, so yeah, if you have space Che Guevara, I have space murder Batman. So there's the planet Nostromo, which is subtle, which is a planet of perpetual darkness in the Ghoul stars. And it is this polluted nightmare planet that never sees the sun. Only the absolute richest can afford artificial light, and toxic clouds and a perpetual eclipse, which is insane. I mean, the populace has adapted to the darkness, and they're all like pale skinned and black eyed, and I guess they look like strangers. But this pod crashes into the planet and digs all the way to the core. And it is little baby Conrad Kurz. And he just goes out and raises himself. And suddenly, these high up corrupt, first these thugs and gangers start disappearing, and they start showing up flayed and flensed and brutally murdered. And then, their bosses start showing up murdered, and then corrupt politicians start showing up murdered, and people just start showing up murdered. And eventually word spreads of this guy, the Night Haunter, which is, God, that's like the name of a wizard van. They just start showing up murdered, and the crime rate drops to almost zero because people are in fear of the Night Haunter, who is Conrad Kurz. And he becomes the king of Nostromo by basically conquering this one town or one city, and the other 3 cities all just submit to fear that they don't want to get murdered, because he doesn't sick secret police on you or anything like that. He sicks himself on you. He is basically Judge Death in a lot of ways, where Judge Death sees any crime as punishable by death, and life is therefore a crime because crimes are only perpetuated by the living. Like, he is this absolute cartoonish figure. But yeah, so it's implied that he kind of had a dual personality, however, where one half craves justice and the other one was touched by chaos, and is the one that causes him to flens people alive and so on.
Corax didn't fall to chaos during the Horus Heresy. And the main reason he didn't fall to chaos is because he and the War Master Horus did not get along. They didn't like each other. Corax thought that he was an egotistical douchebag who had no idea how to use his troops. And Horus thought Corax was a soft-hearted weenie boy who would rather hide than fight. Horus didn't get to Corax. So when the Horus Heresy happened, they were like, nah, fuck these Raven Guard guys. We're gonna get them out of the way quick. And they mostly did. The Raven Guard didn't do a ton of participation in the Horus Heresy. They were in the Drop Site Massacre in Isfahan, never really recovered from that.
Yeah, and we'll touch on that in a minute. Believe it or not, Conrad Kurz, the fucking murder Batman touched by chaos growing up on a sunless planet, didn't turn out to be a nice guy. He was found by the Emperor and Dorn, Ferrus Manus, like a bunch of Primarchs came to take him away, and he was like, all right, I'm going to go with you. And he just suddenly had these visions of the entire Horus Heresy, everything from Fulgrim turning to his own death way down the line. And that's why he just went along with Horus, because, man, I saw it in a dream. I guess I'll do it. Because he was kind of this slave to what he thought was fate. And whenever fate got bucked, which happens a lot in some very bad books, he got real upset.
Right. So let's talk about the character of their legions real quick. So before Corax inherited the 19th Legion, what would become the Raven Guard, they were used in a very similar way the Night Lords were, which is to say they were terror troops. They would go in and they would terrorize and just completely destroy from a physical and mental standpoint their enemies. And they would hold no quarter. They'd only take prisoners to torture them to death and display their bodies on their like rhinos and stuff, which I know the Night Lords are big on. That's a big thing they like to do. But their old Raven Guard, the 19th Legion, used to do the same thing. And a lot of their ranks were filled by prisoners from Terra. Like violent prisoners from Terra. So when Corax came to town, he saw this and he was like, whoa, these guys are basically the overseers, the guys that ran Deliverance before Corax took over. And he had to purge his legion from most of these, horrible terror and fear obsessed Marines, these Space Marines. And he sent a whole bunch of them off to the very edge of the galaxy, and we're like, all right, you're going to protect the Imperium from extra galactic threats in a big like crusade fleet, and got them out of his way so he could form the Raven Guard in the way he saw fit, which is to say, someone who tries to work for the common person.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the Night Lord just kind of leaned into it. So you figure, the recruits of the Night Lords come from Nostromo, and it's only going to be the toughest and the strongest who become the Space Marine recruits. The thing is, on this planet that, well, once Conrad left, it went right back to where it was. So who are the strongest and most brutal people on this crime-ridden planet where the highest form of birth control is suicide? Well, it turns out it's more criminals. Your entire legion is made of criminals, just hardened, brutal criminals. And as a result, Conrad Kurz saw his own legion as the thing he hated the most, and is kind of, I think he's unique among the Primarchs in that he actively hated his legion and didn't want anything to do with them.
Did he try to get them killed?
He would regularly put them in not quite suicide attacks, but as he got crazier and crazier, he'd put them in more and more desperate attacks that had less and less of a chance of winning. But at first,
it's the exact opposite of Korax.
Yeah. But
because whenever Horus would be like, all right, Raven Guard, storm these gates, Korax would be like, fuck you, dude. My guys are good at sneaking around. Send the fucking Iron Hands or Iron Warriors up to storm these gates. I'm going to fucking go around. And Horus was like, you suck.
Yeah. On the other hand, the Night Lords just go hard with the terror tactics. Like, they broadcast on all the Vox channels, like nightmarish screaming and all this sort of shit. So all your signals are just screams, and then they decorate their armor with terror markings, which honestly, I don't know who they're trying to scare with all the skulls and lightning bolts, but it's cool. It's, again, very Wizard Van. It's very Judas Priest album art. And the other Primarchs didn't really like this. He almost came
to... I don't... Kurz was not popular at all.
No, he kind of got along with Mortarion. I think that's about it.
Mortarion, it's the weird kid and the smelly kid.
Yeah, exactly. It's the kid with the skin condition and the kid next to him who's always wearing sunglasses and a crow t-shirt.
Who wakes up every morning and palm slams a VHS of the Chronicles of Riddick and the CR.
I thought he'd wake up, grab a bunch, put on a little makeup.
Oh God. Oh man. So let's talk about them in 40k. So these legions were as different as Knight and a different kind of Knight from
as Knight and Lord.
Sorry. They're different. And the way that they ended up persecuting their battles were kind of similar in the fact that they like lightning strikes and quick engagements and infiltration and stuff. But they were doing it for vastly different reasons, for vastly different people. So in 40k, what this turns out is their rules are actually kind of similar. The trait for Raven Guard is they're -1 to hit it, more than 12 inches away. The trait for what do you call it? Night Lords, rather, is -1 leadership to enemy units within 6 inches that can stack multiple times. But the Night Lords have a stratagem that allows you, it's a 1 CP stratagem called In Midnight Clad. Use a stratagem when a Night Lord's infantry unit is targeted by a shooting attack. For the rest of the phase, your opponent must subtract 1 from all the hit rolls of that unit, which is kind of cool. They kind of work in the same way. They both love lightning claws for some reason.
Both love jump packs too.
Right. So the Raven Guard relic is a jump pack that hooks your guy up, which I never use because I don't have any fucking jump pack guys. The Night Lord relic is a pair of lightning claws that is actually pretty fucking rad. It's a +1 strength, -3 AP, D3 damage, and you get +1 attack and reroll wounds.
This is insane.
It's pretty fucking good.
It's a shame the Chaos Lord of Lightning Claws model sucks a tremendous amount of ass.
It's not good at all. And then the Warlord trait for the Night Lords is once per battle, you can reroll a single hit, wound, damage, advance, charge, or saving throw made for your Warlord. So he gets a free reroll every turn, which is, super useful. The Raven Guard Warlord trait is situationally good. You can't fire Overwatch at him.
It's all right.
It's all right. Yeah. It's not that great though. So they're both about in the 40k and the way the game plays. They're both sort of about infiltration, about getting. Raven Guard are more sit back and shoot. They don't want to get too close because they lose their chapter tactic too close. Well, the Night Lords are more we're going to get real close and scare all your guys off.
Yeah, and the morale modifier actually has like an effect now, unlike having fear back in 7th edition 40k or whatever. It's elegant. I like it.
Right. If you can get a bunch of raptors or warp talons or something that are night lords like in against like a bunch of guardsmen, and you just start plunking off a couple of guys, they're going to start failing leadership tests, and guys are going to start running away and losing that way. So they've turned out to be somewhat different in the way that they're work on the battlefield in 40k, but in a lot of ways they're still similar with their lightning strikes.
What happened, you know, with Corax and the Horus Heresy and Deliverance and all that? So
Corax, he escaped Isfahan by the skin of his teeth and went back to Deliverance, and he wanted to build up the strength of his legion quickly because they were heavily depleted after the drop site massacre. So he started doing genetic experimentations that the Emperor gave him. Like, he was like, hey, here's how to do this. Here's how to grow Space Marines. But Corax wasn't as good as the Emperor at it and kind of fucked it up and made a bunch of mutant Space Marines, like big hulking mutant monstrosities. And the Raven Guard were like, well, we kind of have to use these guys. So they called them Raptors. And they were these big mutant dudes that would run around on battlefields, and they were loyal. They were like Frankenstein's monster. Well, Frankenstein's monster is a dick in the book. But in a lot of the movie versions of Frankenstein's monster, he's a nice guy, but he's just a mutant, horrible monster that's also nice. And these guys are like that. They're loyal Space Marines, but they're just mutant, horrible monsters.
They're just the toxic Avenger, yeah.
Pretty much. So the Raven Guard don't really get into any of the big engagements in the rest of the Horus Heresy because they just didn't have enough guys. But they were, waging a guerrilla war against Horus's supply lines and against the backfield of the Trade of Marines for most of the Heresy. So after the Heresy fails, ish, Corvus Corax goes back to Deliverance, and he realizes that he's got all these monsters around that he can't do anything with because the war is over for the most part. Mm-hmm. And they're wild creatures. They're loyal. They're his sons, but he's got to put them down. And he does that. And he goes and he personally executes all of the Raptor Marines. And this drives him a little crazy. So he goes into seclusion for a whole year in his tower on Deliverance. And then after that, he comes out and he's like, nevermore, and fucks off to the Eye of Terror, never to be seen again.
I'm glad him saying nevermore is still part of the fluff, because that's the silliest fucking thing. Because I'm trying to picture, is he just sitting there for a year being like, all right, I've got to just drop. I got to say something and drop the mic when those people ask me where I've been. I got it.
So what I'm trying to say is he's coming back. He'll get a model maybe not 8th edition, but sometime he'll get a model. It'll be tight.
Well, I'll
get a Primarch too.
I'm glad Deliverance is doing okay, because Nostromo didn't do so well. Before the Heresy even started, Kurz flew back to Crime Planet and blew it up. Because when he found out it was just as full of crime and corruption as it was before, he got mad, shot a laser to the core of the planet that he left when he first came there, and blew it up. And Dorn is like, what the fuck, dude? And
that's a
actual quote.
It's a good reaction to have. It's like you killed your own planet.
Yeah. He tried to tell people about his visions, and his brothers all started snitching on him, and he started killing loyalists before the Heresy even broke out. It's really clear what side this guy was going to be on once things went down. As for the Heresy, he just kind of bopped all around the universe trying to die because he really wanted to die. Kept getting captured, kept torturing Vulcan, and then kept going hog wild before letting himself get assassinated. So during the Dropsite Massacre, he was involved. He actually...
Yeah, the Netlords were there, yeah.
Yep, he got in a fight with... he actually rescued Lorgar. I was about to say Lorax. You put that in my head earlier. He rescued Lorgar from Corax and was able to fight him off and save his fucking lame-ass brother.
Yeah, that's right. Fucking Corax was about to kill Lorgar because Lorgar sucks.
Lorgar does suck.
And then Kurz was like, oh... Check it out, now it's 2-on-1, fuck you. And Corax had to be like, fuck.
Yeah, and then he fights Vulcan or Vulcan gets hit by like a nuclear missile but doesn't die because he's a perpetual. And Kurz kidnaps Vulcan and just spends like forever just torturing him. And like he tries to eat him. He sticks a fork in his heart. He casts him into a giant murder maze with his hammer at the middle, hoping that Vulcan can kill him. A lot of stuff happens in Vulcan Lives, and it all sounds really stupid.
Vulcan stories are dumb. I like Vulcan as a character, and I love the salamanders, but that's a very poorly written piece of the Horus Heresy.
Yeah, and eventually he fought the Lion. He fought the Lion and Gilman at the same time, and he was able to fight them both off by like setting off a trap and exploding a church behind him and going, next time, He-Man. And all he did was just bounce around space, getting captured, breaking out, getting captured, breaking out. He spent like half a year on a Dark Angel ship being Murder Batman, where they thought they had captured him and they could never find him. He goes through the first few books of the Horus Heresy are with him in them is cool. And anything Aaron Dembski-Bowden writes with him in it is super cool and gives a lot of like insight into how his Legion reacts to their dad going fucking insane. But so much of his fluff sucks.
They gotta be like, oh, this fucking guy again.
Yeah. Why
are we listening to this guy?
Well, even in the Night Lords books, which are fucking good. Those are amazing books. They just own their father. They can't stand him.
I can imagine. Yeah.
Especially even before he fucked off and died. He was sending his Legion into desperate suicide attacks against the Imperium, where he was just costing his own lives. He was comatose for a while after getting beat up by Lionel Johnson, and that's when his Legion started to splinter. And he's a really bad leader with a really cool suit of armor. But he also did foresee his own death. And every time he'd foresee his own death and try to meet it, it would never meet him until he was encountered by the assassin Mshen, because they had to squeeze in one more fucking Heart of Darkness reference with this dork. Because I don't know if you know it, but there's a book called Heart of Darkness about a guy named Colonel Kurtz being hunted down. And in Apocalypse Now, Martin Sheen plays the guy who hunts him down, hence M. Shen. And this assassin he sees coming to kill him finds him meeting no resistance whatsoever. No guards. He doesn't put up a fight. He just says, I knew you were coming. I did what I was supposed to do. I punished those who had wronged, and kill me. That's vindication for the Emperor's plan, because he always thought the Emperor wanted him dead. And he let himself die because he believed he was the villain he had sought out to destroy.
Good.
Yep. That being said, his whole suit of armor, or his whole like panoply of war, is hilariously named.
Okay.
Because he doesn't just wear armor. It is the Nightmare Mantle. His lightning claws are mercy and forgiveness. And then he has these throwing knives called the Widowmakers. Like, he might as well have a pair of brass knuckles that say love and hate on them.
Did he have a sick wallet chain?
He did, and there was flayed skulls on it. It was really cool.
Oh man, to go with his like giant black Jinkos
in his power denim.
I feel like you'd see Kurz and Korax at the mall, right? And like Korax has got like a bunch of makeup on and his like Morrissey fucking pompadour going, and his like black clothes, and he's just like smoking clove cigarettes and whatever. And you got like Kurz, he's there, and he's like black tank top, like shitty tribal tattoos, Jinkos, smoking like fucking Pall Malls.
Dude, he's not smoking, he's huffing spray paint. The dude's fucking nuts. Like, all the way through the heresy and the Great Crusade, he's just going increasingly crazy as he gets vision after vision. Here's the thing, me at like 13 would be like, yeah, this guy's cool. Yeah, we murder Batman. He's so badass. And now I'm just like, oh, what a dork.
No, he's the worst. He's the absolute worst.
He sucks. I think the Night Lords are super cool. I think they're a chapter or a legion that's had a lot of great stuff written about them, but I think Kurz kind of sucks.
All right. So that's we're going to be coming back to this sort of segment where we're compare and contrast some famous Space Marine legions in the future. But we thought that Goth versus Goth was a good one to start with, because they're Pretty similar in a lot of different ways. So let's move on to the last part of the show here, man, because we are running long as fuck. And we'll do fact or fan fiction. You got anything good for me this time?
I never read anything good for you. I have things written for you.
All right, give it to me.
Surged K moved stealthily up the dark street in the middle of the night. Followed closely by his squad, he proceeds to jump over a barrier. At this time, his squad member, Octaves, spots an orc knob resting and calls it in. The comm came to life. Sarg, orc knob spotted. Permission to fire. No, young one. We must not blow our cover. Aye, sir. The crackling of the comms died out. The squad proceed to move, swerving through old guard emplacements. Suddenly, a squad member tripped and fell over a tripwire, which, then triggered an explosion of a large magnitude. The squad quickly opened up on every sleeping orc the could see, only to be met with brute force. Fortunately, the Imperial Guard lines were only 100 m away, and they opened up on the swirling melee and hit a Sergeant K in the shoulder pad with an autocannon round. As a result, it tore his arm half off. There was blood everywhere, and the Marine was yelling in pain but continued to fight on. The orcs quickly retreated, seeing such an act of pure will to fight them off, and also due to the ferocity of the Space Marines in combat.
The frosty?
Surged. The ferocity.
I thought you said frosty.
Surged K. No frosties here.
Like from Wendy's.
Yeah, that you dip the French fries in.
Delicious.
Surged K was quickly rushed to the medic station just behind Imperial lines where his wounds were attended to by the medics until an apothecary mended his arm to the point where it was suited for a tech priest to install bionic implants, repair shoulder joints. God, that's a long sentence. A junior officer rushed into the room where the wounded Space Marine stood up to greet him. The guard's men, plural, snapped a salute and said, "We have found the solider who shot you." A young guardsman, plural again, was dragged into the room and thrown on the dirt floor. Sergeant K, would you like him to be executed? No. Why? The young guardsman was on 16 and was beaten by his fellow guardsmen. He shall be attached to my squad as punishment. By the way, the only use of quotes is around the word punishment, not in any of the dialogue. Yes, sir. The young guardsman stood up and reached out to shake the Marine's hand and said, "My name's Rex." The Marine shook his hand and said, "Call me Sergeant K."
Oh, that's Garbo, man.
Yeah,
that's terrible. That's got to be fan fiction.
Yeah,
I don't know what for though.
This is, well, first of all, I can't finish reading this, but it is fan fiction. I can't finish reading this fan fiction without reading the poster's forum signature.
Okay.
95% of teens would go into a panic if the Jonas Brothers were about to jump off the Empire State Building. Copy and paste this if you are in the 5% who would pull up a lawn chair, grab some popcorn, and yell, "Jump, bitches!" Then like 12 exclamation points.
The Jonas Brothers?
Yeah.
Oh, the singers.
The boy band.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Are they still a thing?
I don't think so. But that is The Pure One by Rydon, who also writes a lot of fan fiction about Arvin Larn's dad.
I don't know.
You know, the guy from 16 Hours' dad?
Oh.
Yeah, he writes a lot of fan fiction about him that gets weirdly sexist, and I don't feel comfortable reading it on the show.
All right, cool. Well, that was terrible, and I feel much stupider. So let's close the show before I drown myself in my own drool. So I sent out those copies of Guild Ball, one to a fellow named Rich in Illinois and another to a fellow named Brian in Wellington, New Zealand.
Wowie.
He and I were chatting, I was trying to get his address and stuff, and he's responding to me 2 hours before he was to get married. So Brian, if you're, or Ben, his name's not Brian, his name's fucking Ben, I'm sorry. Ben, if you're listening, I packed that box with a little something extra for you. And I hope you like it. Speaking of packing extra things into containers, buy some of our shirts.
Go to shop.spreadshirt.com/camtunes and you can buy one of our Badcast Bad shirts. They come in a bunch of sizes, a bunch of colors. It lets you help the show and rep the fact that you listen to a terrible podcast about Warhammer 40,000.
Listen, it's not a terrible podcast. Okay, the content is terrible, but it sounds good.
This is true. This is very true.
I know that some of you out there don't have Badcast Bad shirts yet. And you fucking better buy some Badcast Bad shirts. I want an Astraeus. I want one for Nova. So buy it. So I can buy pennies, my stupid piece of resin.
For just pennies a day, you can contribute to the Dan Boyd Resin Albatross Fund.
You can find us on Twitter. Also, I'm at DB_sleazy. He is at Brother SRM. You can give us your hot takes and ask us what to do about stuff, like that time that guy asked us what to do at BWI, and we were like, I don't fucking know.
Get drunk and call your mom.
He did ask us what to do that he was drunk, and we said, I think it was don't get arrested, call your mom, be respectful to other people, and what was the last one?
I thought that was about the end of that interaction.
Yeah. I think it's pretty good advice.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good advice for pretty much everybody. Or like I was talking to this other dude on Twitter, Tristan Gray, who was looking for good game stores in Boston. I pointed him towards a few good places to get beer while he was up here. So
Dorian Gray?
Tristan Gray.
Dorian Gray?
I can't verify if he has a picture of himself in his attic, but it's probably for egotistical reasons, not because he's cursed. I'm just kidding. You seem like a real nice dude.
Yeah, he's totally cursed. Anyways, you can also get us at our email, contact@40kbadcast.com, where we will talk to you about stuff. And sometimes we forget to sign which one of us is talking, and so you have to figure it out for yourself.
Basically, if the 40k Badcast email replies to you first, it's probably me, because then I tell Dan to check the email.
If it happens very late at night on the East Coast, it's probably me, because that's when I'm doing computer stuff.
I do it when I'm supposed to be working, so figure it out.
All right, that's going to do it for us this time on the 40k Badcast. So, Campbell, do you have an inspirational quote for us to exit the episode in?
When in deadly danger, when beset by doubt, run in little circles, wave your arms and shout.
And do it with a smile, because you've just listened to the 40k Badcast, where we're bad at 40k, and you can too. Adios, muchachos.
Bad at closing shows, too.